Welcome to the show, Ed Domain, founder and CEO of Techly.com. Great show. You got to check it out if you haven't seen it. Travis Sheridan, welcome back. Director of Venture Cafe Foundation for about how many days now?
4 days now.
4 days, yeah. That's great. And Jay DeLong, Vice President, St. Louis Regional Chamber. Okay, so this Valley of Death, help us kind of wrap our brains around this particular buzzword.
Sure. Well, the early stages of any business, you're going to have a lot more expenses than you do revenue. And particularly in a product development, a technology space, you're going to burn through a lot of money before you get to that prototype part where you're going to start selling it perhaps to your first customers, right? And so that notion that you've got lots of expenditures and no revenue and it kind of goes out over time, at some point you're going to have a product and you can start selling it. Now, if you get a product and you start selling it, then you come out of the Valley of Death. Now as Jim mentioned, there's limited market opportunity, so if you linger in the valley too long and your market opportunity is dissipated, then you die in the canyon. If you're lucky and you get something that works, and you get something that works well, then you've got to go out and raise capital. You got to ramp up. You got to go into mass production. You've got to get people to sell it on the street. You got to have a good marketing team that doesn't blow it, and then you ramp up and you come out of that and you have potentially hockey stick growth, which makes you and all your investors happy.
And then Facebook buys you and you live happily ever after.
That's the theory, yeah.
But I think to Jay's point, I think a lot of startups have to understand what that valley looks like, what the terrain looks like, how much water do they have for that journey, right? And I think that...
very Oregon Trail.
It is very Oregon Trail, yes. Donner Party of two.
Yeah. Wow, that's getting worse.
But to Jay's point, understanding how to survive that valley, and I think St. Louis provides a lot of resources, not just the fact that we have a slow burn rate on the capital here, but there are a lot of easy ways to move through that valley a lot faster. And a lot of people that are willing to be customer number one and try things out to help get you to revenue a little bit faster as well.
If I might, I think one of the competitive factors of being in St. Louis has been historically, it's been very difficult to raise a lot of outside capital. So instead of working something on a napkin and showing some investors, they give you a chunk of $6 million and you got 3 months to prove it out. Most of our startups have been focused on getting traction with customers and generating revenue as quickly as possible, not trying to meet milestones of an equity investor. And so as a consequence, if you look at the horizon of the past 5 years of all the startups that we track who started, we have a really high percentage of those that are still in business and that are starting to come out of that Valley of Death, bootstrapping it and generating sales, and that's how they're starting to grow.
Ed, I guess if you have an entire show where you interview and report on this very topic, that must mean something is going on in St. Louis. Are you hearing this kind of same stuff from people that you have on your show?
Of course, all the time. I'm interviewing entrepreneurs that have won Arch grants, people that have started companies and moved here for different reasons. But I think one thing that really speaks to what's happening here is there's a company that was acquired called Absorb that won an Arch grant. Someone moved here from Dallas. They were acquired by a Vancouver firm. One of the co-founders of that company moved back to St. Louis, it turns out, and decided to launch another company, attracted somebody from San Francisco to move here to launch that company with him, and they recruited another guy from Seattle to move his company here. So yes, we are seeing all kinds of amazing things happening in St. Louis.
Why, and give it to me straight, in a way that I can understand it. No acronyms. Why would they do that?
Well, as Zoe said, your runway, which is how much money you have until you're done, is longer here. There's a lot of support here. There really is fewer degrees of separation to getting people you need. I've been to other cities and I've interviewed other people in different states, and what's unique about St. Louis is, and you'll hear this from other people, we're all rowing in the same direction. Nobody tries to say, no, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Everybody wants to see each other succeed, and so I think there's a very big spirit of intellectual generosity, and if someone can help you out, they generally do.
And I would add to that St. Louis is known for not being comfortable with failure. We don't talk about failure a lot. That's one of the things we need to get over if we're going to become even more innovative. But because
risk averse?
Yeah, we're risk averse. And since we don't talk about failure a lot, we like to help other people succeed so that we don't have to have those uncomfortable conversations. So it almost fuels a spirit of collaboration. We're like, okay, we don't want to talk about the failure. So Ed, what can I do to help you succeed? So we don't have to have a strange chat about failure.
So, okay, you say we're rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Are people outside of your circles also even in the boat? I'm curious, is there a story that needs to be told that everybody can kind of get on board with? Is this part of our identity yet as a region?
Yeah, we went through a couple, all of us have been talking about this with each other and meeting. We tried to figure out how to make it work better for all of us. And we sort of came to a conclusion last summer that we could brand this activity. We could start to package this. We could all speak to the same story. We could show the same statistics. And right now it's under the brand of Accelerate STL, and there's a website.org, and there's a PowerPoint deck. There's a lot of data that anyone's welcome to use that helps folks here in our community first, but outside our community to understand what our authentic story of entrepreneurship is. And it's pretty amazing. Last year we had great growth. There was over $380 million of venture capital that came into our startups. And if you look at the origin of that, only about 20 million of that money was St. Louis money. And if you look at the check writers who wrote those investments, there's probably only 200 folks who actually wrote the checks for $20 million. $360 million came from outside. And that's fantastic. It's a huge growth. 33 companies raised over $1 million. On average, it was $5.5 million raised by each one of those companies. That's a huge growth from years past. I mean, we're really starting to see some traction.
So if I were to ask you, how does that compare to Silicon Valley? Is that even an appropriate question for what we're trying to do here?
It's apples to oranges. I don't think we're not at the point where we need to compare to. What we compare is year-over-year growth for St. Louis. That's where we have data that shows a success rate. As Jay mentioned, we're seeing enormous growth when we look year over year. If we look outside the area, it's just there's too many variables to take into consideration. Markets are different, economic conditions are different, talent might be different. So it really shouldn't be, and that's one of the things that I appreciate about our local media, the 9 Network, the Business Journal, Techly. They are telling the St. Louis story so that we can change the narrative internally without being so drawn to comparing ourselves to the outside.
Well, back to these talented entrepreneurs, what are they telling you? Are they going to stay? Do they see this as not just a runway, but a flight path? I don't know.
Yes.
The analogy's breaking down over
No,
there.
absolutely. The people that I've met that have come from the outside that have come here have said they've been shocked at, in a good way, about how wonderful St. Louis has been for their business. And I think that as someone that came from the outside myself, I just didn't realize how much was happening here. And so when I got here and I started to meet other people that were doing the same thing, I think the entrepreneurs you meet that have come here from elsewhere are not only excited about their business, they're also civically engaged. You were talking about the tax earlier, and there's a lot of things that we're very interested in. We're very interested in seeing St. Louis improve and be better than it is. Not that it's not great now, but we're all very engaged in making that happen. So yes, I think we are going to stay and that we're going to continue to build the
city.
city.
This is not just, so it's not just coding. And we've got Greetable, we just heard from Zoe, has a physical product. We've got the biosciences. We've got, do these need to be distinguished between, and are we doing better in one than the other? Should we claim one and go in that direction? Or
one of the things that I see that's transitioning in St. Louis is that we are becoming more innovative just as a community. So we're looking at new ways to apply innovation, applying it in education, applying it maybe in government services, applying it through clean energy, healthcare. We're just looking at how can we apply innovation as a discipline. And I think that will allow new markets and new market opportunities to continue to bubble up.
What does this do, not to sound selfish, but what does this do for the rest of us? Is this just something where those of you in this community benefit, or does this...
Actually, a lot. So the company I mentioned that was acquired, and then Marshall Haas is the guy that founded the company. He moved back to St. Louis. Some people, naysayers, said, why are we giving these people an arch grant? They're getting acquired and moving to another city. Well, it's good for a couple reasons. One, it's shown a light on St. Louis that wasn't there before. No other cities have a program just like arch grants around the country. So it validated the program because another city was interested enough to acquire this talent. Second, it shows that people are coming from different places and they're moving to St. Louis, but cities will spend a lot of money trying to attract a Fortune 500 company that may or may not bring jobs with them. They might be around for a few years and they might cut bait and leave town. The entrepreneurs that are civically engaged, like I said, are not, they're very idealistic, or they wouldn't be running a startup. So they're not only involved in growing their company here, they're creating jobs, and we're at the very beginning of what you're going to see a massive job surge in the next few years, but they're also improving the city.
Bouncing off of jobs, Robin Wabi from the mayor's office tweeting us. She's very involved in education. She's asking if there's maybe a component that needs to go a little earlier in the education stream there. Do we need to be introducing IT to middle schoolers?
And there's some efforts to do that. There's programs to introduce coding to the junior high, high school. I think there's a big disconnect. There's a lot of high school girls who are interested in coding, but that I think 70% was a statistic I had read recently, but that drops off substantially when you compare to the number of women who graduate college with science degrees. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we keep them interested, engaged, and welcomed into those technology universities so that part of our population can continue to excel? So there's a lot of things that we can do. Entrepreneurship and innovation and technology awareness through our school system would be fantastic.
Code Red education.
Yeah, Code Red education is a great one.
in St. Louis, and they've gotten into the Normandy Public School District and a number of other ones.
Some good after-school programs that have introduced technology into school districts that wouldn't have been able to afford it, students that would have been able to have those things themselves.
What we're seeing a lot with education as well is it's not just exposing students so they're aware of it, but it's exposing them so they can actually experience it. So it's not a career fair where they can go listen to a programmer, but actually putting programming into the curriculum or putting civic progress and civic pride and civic engagement into the curriculum, because students will become more engaged, and then that's how they see it as a career path, is if they've been able to experience it, firsthand.